Welcome to the Bible Odyssey. This is the place where you fall asleep safely held in the loving comfort of your Creator. Tonight, I want to settle something in your heart before we begin. Not a technique, not a formula, just the truth, spoken slowly. Say this with me if you can, softly. I believe the Lord comforts me tonight. Again, I believe the Lord comforts me tonight. One more time with conviction. I believe the Lord comforts me tonight. Good. Let that settle. Not because you must feel it to make it true, because it is true. Whether the night is easy or hard, whether the heart is full or empty, He is with you tonight. And tomorrow morning, before your feet touch the floor, before the day begins, whisper this in your heart 3 times. I believe this is the day the Lord has made. I believe this is the day the Lord has made. I believe this is the day the Lord has made. Now let's open His Word together. Let your eyes close, softly, without effort at all. Tonight, you are on the roadside, not in the bustling crowd, but beside it. You are the one who has spent so long watching life pass by, rather than living inside it. You know this place well. The road feels familiar beneath you. You've learned to read the sound of the crowd, to tell from their footsteps and voices whether today is just another ordinary day or whether something holy is drawing near. Today, the crowd sounds different. There is a weight, a direction, a living hope in their movement that stirs something deep inside you. Something uncommon is passing by, and in this moment, a quiet decision is forming in your heart, whether to cry out, whether your need is great enough, whether this moment is sacred enough, whether your hope is strong enough to risk being told to be quiet. So take a slow, gentle breath in and let it go. You are still on the roadside. The crowd is moving past, and the tender question rising in your heart is as old as time. The quiet wondering of every person who needs help and isn't sure if they're allowed to ask. But listen to me. It is enough. Your need is enough. Your hope is enough. Cry out. He is going to stand still for you. Mark chapter 10, verses 46 through 52. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and His disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, He's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and His disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. The name matters. In a gospel that leaves many of the healed unnamed, the paralyzed man lowered through the roof, the woman with the hemorrhage, the 10 lepers. This man is named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a specific person with a specific identity, specific enough to be named in the record, his name carried in the Gospel of Mark across 2,000 years because the name was worth carrying. The naming is itself a form of the seeing that the story is about. He was blind. The account implies a long-established condition, not recent blindness, but the blindness of someone whose position on the roadside was known, whose presence there was part of the landscape of Jericho. He was not a newcomer to the roadside. He had been there long enough that the roadside had become his place, the economically viable location for someone whose blindness had closed every other economic pathway. Blindness in first-century Judea was not primarily a medical condition. It was an economic catastrophe. The trades and crafts and agriculture that constituted the working life of the ancient world required sight. The merchant, the craftsman, the farmer, the fisherman, the work of the ordinary life was visual work. The blind man in first-century Judea had one economic option: begging. And the economics of begging required visibility, being seen by the people who had the capacity to give. The roadside outside the city gate, where travelers entered and left, was the most economically viable position available to a blind beggar. He sat there because it was where the life that was available to him could be lived. He could not see the road, he could hear it. And in the hearing, because blindness relocates awareness into the remaining senses, and the ears carry more of the world than they were designed to carry, he knew the road well. He knew the sound of the ordinary day. He knew when the crowd was larger than usual. He knew when the quality of the movement suggested something different from the routine. He heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth. The word passing through the crowd, person to person, voice to voice, reaching the roadside where Bartimaeus was sitting. Jesus of Nazareth, the healer, the teacher, the one about whom the stories had been told in Jericho. And he had heard them all, because the blind hear everything, because when sight is gone, the world comes in through the ears, and the ears do not sort what is important from what is not. He had heard the stories, and now the hearing was approaching the moment of the testing. Jesus of Nazareth was on this road, right now, close enough to cry out to, and the question was, would the crying out be worth it? He began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me, Son of David," not Rabbi, the respectful address of a student approaching a teacher. Not teacher, the title that positioned the speaker as a learner seeking wisdom. Son of David, the messianic title. The address that said, "I know who you are, and I am not coming to you as a curious student or a respectful observer. I am coming to you as a desperate man coming to the one who has the authority to change the nature of my life. Son of David, have mercy on me." The petition in 4 words, not a carefully constructed theological request, not a presentation of the case with supporting evidence. The raw, bodily, completely specific cry of someone who has been on the roadside long enough and who has heard enough about this one passing by to believe that the moment is real and the asking is warranted. Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. Many, not one, many. The crowd that was accompanying Jesus, the the crowd of the disciples and the followers and the people of Jericho who had turned out to see him pass through. Many of them, when the blind beggar cried out, told him to be quiet. The crowd that was moving with a purpose and a destination did not have room in its movement for the interruption of a blind beggar's cry. The crowd's logic was not unreasonable. There were many people in Jericho with needs. There was a limited amount of the teacher's time and attention. The crowd was moving and had places to be. The blind beggar on the roadside was not on anyone's agenda. His cry was, by the crowd's accounting, an imposition, the insertion of an individual need into the collective movement of a group with a direction. Be quiet. Your need is inconvenient to the crowd's movement. The crowd's rebuke is not always a crowd. It takes many forms in the modern life. The family system that communicates, in the small and habitual ways that family systems communicate these things, that a particular person's needs are too much, too frequent, too intense, that the emotional bandwidth required by this person's needs exceeds what the family has available, and that a more measured, more manageable presentation of the needs would be appreciated. The faith community that has an implicit accounting of what appropriate need looks like, the need that can be named in a prayer request, the need that fits in a testimony, the need that resolves in a reasonable time frame, and that communicates, in the subtle ways that communities communicate, that the need which is too large, too ongoing, too unresolved, is a difficult fit for the community's bandwidth. The professional context that rewards the person who manages their presentation, who brings their competence to the room without their need, who holds the need separately from the performance, who does not let the need be visible in the spaces where the performance is required. The interior voice, the most relentless form of the be quiet. The voice that has absorbed the crowd's message so completely that it no longer requires the crowd to be present in order to deliver the rebuke. The voice that says, your need is too much. The asking is too frequent. The wanting is too intense. Be quiet. Manage the presentation. Be the person who handles things rather than the person who needs things. Be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. He did not stop. This is the most important decision in the story, and it is not a heroic decision, it is a desperate one. He could not afford to stop. Jesus of Nazareth was passing through Jericho. The crowd was moving. If he went quiet when the many told him to, the moment would pass. The road would empty. The next morning would be the same as every morning before it. The roadside and the begging and the blindness. He could not afford the quiet, so he shouted all the more. And the crowd's be quiet was not the last word. It never has been. Jesus stopped. He stood still. In the middle of the moving crowd, on the road outside Jericho, with the disciples and the followers, and the many who had just told Bartimaeus to be quiet, Jesus stood still. The crowd that had been telling Bartimaeus to be quiet was in motion. Jesus was not. He stood still. This is the moment the entire story turns on. Not the healing, the stopping, not the question, the standing still that made the question possible. In a crowd that was moving with a direction and a destination, Jesus stopped. In response to the cry that the many had told to be quiet, in response to the need that the crowd's agenda had no room for, in response to the blind beggar on the roadside who should not, by the crowd's accounting, have been able to interrupt the movement of the group. Jesus stopped, and the crowd stopped too, because when the person at the center stops, the crowd around the center stops, and the road outside Jericho, which had been moving and loud and organized around the direction it was heading, went still, because Jesus had stopped. For the blind man on the roadside, for the cry the many had rebuked, for the need that the crowd's agenda had no space for, Jesus stood still, and he said, "Call him." The reversal is complete, and it is swift. The same crowd that had been delivering the "be quiet" was now being sent to deliver the "he is calling you." The many who rebuked became the messengers. The obstacle became the invitation. The crowd that was the problem in one moment became the means of the healing in the next, because the center had stopped and the crowd had to reorganize itself around the new direction of the center. "Cheer up," they said. "Get up. He is calling you. He is calling you." The crowd that said "be quiet" is now saying, "He is calling you." The same voices, different message, because the center had stopped, and the center's stopping changes what the crowd around it says. Throwing his cloak aside, Bartimaeus jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. The cloak of a blind beggar was among his most essential possessions. It was warmth, it was bedding, it was the mat on which the day's collection was spread to be counted at the end of the day. The cloak was the equipment of the roadside life, the practical infrastructure of the existence that the blindness had produced. To throw the cloak aside was to leave behind the infrastructure of the life he was about to not need. It was the act of a man who believed, in the moment of the being called, that what was on the other side of the coming was different enough from what he was leaving that the cloak could go. He threw it. He came. And then Jesus asked him the question, "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus knew what Bartimaeus needed. The man was blind. He had been crying out for mercy. He had been on the roadside begging for however many years the blindness had put him there. The need was not obscure. It was the presenting condition of everything about the encounter. Jesus did not ask because the information was missing. He asked because the asking was itself a gift. "What do you want me to do for you?" The question that treats Bartimaeus not as a category of need, but as a person with a specific desire. Not as the blind man, as the man. As the person whose specific, individual, completely particular want was worth soliciting from his own mouth. Not, "I will heal you. What do you want?" The question that gives the agency back to the person who has been positioned by the blindness on the receiving end of everything, receiving charity, receiving the pity of the passers-by, receiving the crowd's rebuke, receiving now the crowd's calling, and who is suddenly being asked what he wants. This is the gift of the question. The person who has been on the roadside for a long time, who has been in the position where the life was happening to them rather than being shaped by their own agency, receives from the question a restoration of agency that precedes the restoration of sight. What do you want? You, specifically, as a person with desires, rather than simply as a condition requiring address. What do you want me to do for you? The Rabbi of Nazareth surrounded by disciples and followers, on his way somewhere, stood still on the road outside Jericho and asked the blind beggar what he wanted, and waited for the answer. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." Not, "Rabbi, whatever you think is best." Not, "Rabbi, if it is your will." Not the managed, appropriately modest request of someone who has been on the roadside long enough to have learned to manage their presentation. The simple, direct, completely specific want. I want to see. The want named, from the person's own mouth, in response to the question that asked for the specific want. "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Your faith has healed you. Not, my power has healed you. Not, I healed you. Your faith. The faith of the person on the roadside who would not go quiet when the crowd said, "Be quiet." Who shouted all the more when the many rebuked him. Who threw the cloak aside when the calling came. Who came to Jesus without being able to see Jesus, navigating toward the sound of the voice in the stopped crowd, finding his way to the one who stood still, arriving at the feet of the one who asked what he wanted. That faith has healed you. And he followed Jesus along the road, not back to the roadside, along the road he had been positioned beside, the road he had been excluded from, placed alongside rather than on, the road the crowd traveled while he listened from the margin, became the road he walked, on his own feet, following Jesus, no longer on the side, on the road. What do you want me to do for you? The question is being asked right now, not to Bartimaeus on the road outside Jericho 2,000 years ago. To you, in this room, in this dark, in this specific night, with whatever specific need arrived at this night with you. Jesus has stood still. The crowd has gone quiet, and the question is being asked, genuinely, unhurriedly, with the specific personal quality of a question that is waiting for a specific personal answer. What do you want me to do for you? Not, what should you want? Not, what is the theologically appropriate thing to ask for? Not, what want is proportional to your level of faith, or your standing in the community, or your track record of answered prayers? What do you want? The real want, the specific want, the want the roadside has been carrying, the thing you have been hoping for long enough that the hoping has become part of the furniture of the interior, present but not always in the foreground, carried through the ordinary days without always being consciously named. The crowd may have told you that the want is too much. In any of the forms the crowd takes, the family, the community, the professional context, the interior voice that has absorbed the crowd's accounting. The want may have been assessed as too large, too specific, too personal, too inappropriate for the space where prayer is supposed to happen. The crowd may have delivered its "be quiet" about this particular want. Jesus has stood still. He is asking, and the crowd has been sent to say, "He is calling you." The crowd that was the obstacle has been sent with the invitation. The voices that were saying, "Be quiet," are saying, "He is calling you now." Because Jesus stopped. Because the center of the story stood still for you. and the question is being asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" You are allowed to answer in the specific, honest, completely real form of the actual want, not the presentation of the want that the crowd's accounting has trained you to offer, the carefully modulated, appropriately modest, demonstrably reasonable want. The real one, the specific one, the want that Bartimaeus named when the question was asked, "Rabbi, I want to see." Simple, honest, completely specific. He is waiting. The crowd is not saying, "Be quiet right now." He is calling you. Come and tell him what you want. The story is alive in your life right now. The first is the person whose prayer has been met with silence for so long that the silence has begun to feel like a "be quiet." She has been praying the same prayer for 9 years, not a vague or general prayer, the specific prayer for the specific person in the specific situation. The son who walked away, the prayer for his return, for his safety, for the faith she raised him in to find him wherever he has gone. She prays it every morning. Some mornings with the specific feeling of the prayer being received, most mornings with the feeling of the prayer going up and being absorbed by the ceiling of the ordinary. 9 years. The silence has been teaching her something over 9 years, the way silence always teaches, by suggesting, in the patient way of things that simply continue, that the lesson is that the silence is the answer, that the prayer has been heard and filed under, understood but not going to happen, that the blind beggar on the roadside is not the kind of need that stops the crowd. She has been told to be quiet in the small, consistent, accumulating way of 9 years of unanswered prayer, not by a person, by the silence. But the silence teaches what the crowd teaches. Be quiet. The asking is not producing anything. A more measured relationship with the expecting might be easier to sustain across the long run. She shouts all the more, not always with the feeling of confidence, sometimes with the specific, gritty, holding on with the fingernails quality of the faith that keeps praying when the praying does not feel like it is doing anything. The shouting all the more of someone who cannot afford the quiet, who knows that if the praying stops, the hope stops, and the hope is the thing she cannot let go of. Jesus has stood still, in response to every year of the 9 years, in response to every morning prayer that seemed to go no further than the ceiling. The standing still has been happening, not always visible from the roadside, not always confirmable from inside the prayer, but happening. The crowd of the silence has been sent to say, "He is calling you," and the question is being asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" She knows the answer. She has always known the answer. She shouts it again, tonight, with the specific faith of 9 years of shouting all the more. The second is the person who stopped asking for things from God years ago. The stopping was not a loss of faith. It was the management of disappointment. The faith is still present. The attending is still present. The language of the faith is still available. What is not present is the asking. The specific, personal, "This is what I want" asking that requires the hope that the asking will produce something. That hope was present once and was tested in a specific season and was found to be more expensive to maintain than the adjustment to not asking. The adjustment to not asking felt like maturity at the time, like the movement from the naive faith that treats God like a vending machine to the more sophisticated faith that accepts what is given without requiring it to be what was hoped for, like the Bartimaeus who had made peace with the roadside, who had organized the life around the roadside reality and had found within the roadside a sustainable existence, who had stopped shouting because the shouting had not produced anything and the not shouting was easier to sustain across the long run. The cloak is ready to be thrown. The person who has stopped asking has not lost the want. They have separated the want from the asking because the asking had become too expensive to maintain. The want is still there. The son who walked away is still the son who walked away. The healing that was needed is still the healing that was needed. The restoration that was hoped for is still the thing being hoped for, in the quiet way of things that have been hoped for long enough to become part of the furniture. Jesus has stood still. He is calling. Not, come back when the faith is strong enough to ask again. Come now, in the current faith, in the faith that is present even after the stopping of the asking, even after the adjustment to the roadside, even after the management of the disappointment. Come now, throw the cloak aside, the cloak of the not asking, the practical infrastructure of the roadside existence that the adjustment to not asking has produced. He is calling. What do you want me to do for you? The want can be named tonight. The third is the person who does not know how to name the want, the something is wrong awareness without the vocabulary for the something, the need without the specificity that the question seems to require, the wanting to see that is real and present, but that has not yet resolved into the specific, nameable want that I want to see expresses. The person who has been on the roadside long enough that the want has become vague, not from insincerity, but from the specific interior exhaustion of someone who has been hoping for a long time, without the hoping producing clarity about what exactly the hoping is for. Rabbi, I want to see. The simplest possible answer to the question, not the theologically sophisticated answer, not the answer that demonstrates the depth of the faith or the precision of the understanding. The simple, bodily, completely honest naming of the most basic want available. I want to see. The person who does not know how to name the want can start with, I want to see. The seeing that is needed is not always the physical seeing. It is the clarity that the roadside has not produced, the direction that the blindness of the current situation has obscured, the vision for the life that the position beside the road has made difficult to access, the understanding of what is happening and what it means and where it is going. I want to see. Jesus received this answer from Bartimaeus. Simple, honest, the real thing. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was the specific want that the question was asking for, and the faith that named it, the faith that cried out when the crowd said, "Be quiet," that shouted all the more, that threw the cloak aside and came, that faith healed him. Your faith has healed you. Go. Here is what the story of Bartimaeus does in a life that receives it and keeps returning to it. It gives permission to keep crying out. The person who has been told, by silence, by disappointment, by the accumulated message of the unanswered prayer, by the many who have delivered the be quiet in their various forms. To quiet down and make peace with the roadside receives from Bartimaeus the image of the faith that would not go quiet, the faith that cried out when the many rebuked it, the faith that shouted all the more precisely because the shouting was being opposed. Not the confident shouting of someone who has evidence that the shouting is working, the desperate shouting of someone who cannot afford to stop, who knows that the moment is now, who knows that if the going quiet happens, the crowd will move past and the road will empty, and the next morning will be the same as every morning before it. The person who returns to this story regularly, who brings their unanswered prayers and their 9 years of silence and their stopped asking to the image of Bartimaeus on the roadside, finds that the permission to keep crying out gradually becomes more available than the instinct to manage the disappointment. Not because the answer has arrived, because the image of the standing still is more powerful than the message of the silence. He stood still. He is still standing still. He has been standing still since the moment Bartimaeus cried out, and has not moved from the position of the one who heard and stopped, and is waiting for the approach, and is ready to ask the question, "What do you want me to do for you?" The story also does something for the person who has forgotten how to want. The long season on the roadside can produce a specific interior condition, the condition of someone who has been positioning beside the life for long enough that the specific wanting has become vague. The something is wrong feeling without the clarity of what the something is. The need without the vocabulary for the need. The cry without the specific content. The question restores the specificity. What do you want me to do for you? The genuine, unhurried, completely personal solicitation of the specific desire calls the want back into focus. The person who returns to this story and returns to the question, who brings their vague wanting and their roadside position and their stopped asking to the direct question of the one who stood still, finds that the want gradually becomes clearer. Not because the circumstances have changed, because the question has been asked, and the asking calls the answer forward, and the answer, named, becomes the prayer. And the prayer, offered with the faith that shouts all the more, that faith heals. The faith of Bartimaeus was not the faith of the confident. It was the faith of the desperate, the faith of someone who could not afford the quiet, who threw the cloak aside and came without knowing what was on the other side of the coming, who answered the question honestly when the question was asked. That faith, specifically, precisely, by the name Jesus gave it, healed him. Your faith is that faith, and the one who stood still is standing still. The story is alive right now. There is a woman who has been praying for her marriage for 14 years. Not the prayer for the marriage that has ended, the prayer for the marriage that is present but incomplete. The closeness that was present in the early years and that has been replaced gradually by the managed distance of two people who live well together and know each other adequately and have not been fully known by each other in a long time. The prayer for the return of what was there at the beginning. The prayer prayed 14 years with varying degrees of hope and varying degrees of feeling. The crowd has delivered the "be quiet" in the gentle form of the counsel that has been offered by the people who love her. The therapist who said she may be hoping for something the marriage is not built to produce. The friend who said the expectation may be unrealistic. The pastor who said the contentment is the work, not the restoration. All of them caring. All of them, in their various ways, suggesting that a more measured relationship with the specific hope might be more sustainable than the 14 years of the praying for this specific thing. She shouts all the more, not because the 14 years have produced the evidence that the shouting is working, because she cannot afford the quiet, because if the hoping stops, the marriage becomes what the council has suggested it might be: adequate, functional, the managed distance. And the managed distance is not what the covenant was for, and she cannot let go of the covenant's promise. Jesus has stood still, in response to the 14 years, in response to every prayer that seemed to go no further than the ceiling of the bedroom. The standing still is happening. The question is being asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" She knows the answer. "Rabbi, I want to see." The closeness that was there, the knowing and being known that the covenant promised. That your faith has healed you. 14 years of shouting all the more is that faith. There is a man who stopped bringing his real needs to God in his late 30s. He is 54 now. 15 years of the managed relationship with prayer. The attending, the giving, the general gratitude expressed in the general direction of the divine. The absence of the specific asking, because the specific asking had been tested in his late 30s, and the testing had been expensive, and the adjustment to the general gratitude was more sustainable than the continuing of the specific asking. The want is still there, not gone, managed. The thing he stopped asking for is still the thing he would ask for if the asking felt available. The son whose relationship with faith concerns him. The vocation that has not produced what he believed it was building toward. The interior life that has been adequate and has not been the interior life he believed was possible. These wants are still present. They have been on the roadside of the interior for 15 years, sitting beside the life rather than in it, present but not brought to the place of prayer because the bringing had become too expensive. Tonight the story arrives, and the throwing of the cloak of the managed relationship, the practical infrastructure of the 15 years of the adjusted not asking, lands in the place where the wants have been sitting. He is calling you, not come back when the faith is recovered. Come now. In the current faith, the faith that is still present even after 15 years of the managed distance, even after the adjustment, even after the stopping of the specific asking. Come now. Throw the cloak aside. The cloak was the equipment of the roadside existence, and the roadside existence is not where the wants were meant to live. What do you want me to do for you? He knows the answers. He has always known the answers. Tonight he names them. There is a teenager who is in the dark in the interior sense. Not dramatic spiritual crisis. The specific, chronic, low-grade darkness of someone who navigates the days without the clarity that the days require. Who makes decisions and manages relationships and does the work of the adolescent life without the vision, the sense of direction, the clarity about who they are and what they are for, that the life seems to require from the people around them who appear to have it. She does not know how to name what she wants. The want is real and present. She can feel the shape of it from the inside without being able to see it clearly enough to name it. The want for something to be different about the interior. The want for the navigation to feel less like navigating in the dark and more like navigating with light. The want that has not yet resolved into the specific, nameable thing. Jesus has stood still, and the question is being asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the simplest possible answer is available. "Rabbi, I want to see." Not the sophisticated theological request, the simple, honest, completely real want. I want to see. Clarity, direction, the vision for the life that the interior darkness has been obscuring, the seeing that the roadside position has prevented. That answer is enough. It was enough for Bartimaeus. It is enough for her. Your faith has healed you, the faith that cried out when the crowd said, "Be quiet." That is the faith that heals, and the road is ahead, and she is going to walk it. And now, let everything grow very still. You are in your own room, your own bed, your own dark, and the road is outside, and the crowd has gone still, and Jesus is standing still on the road outside Jericho, which is also the road outside this room, the road outside every room where someone has been on the roadside long enough. Let the roadside be received, however long you have been there. The position of the person who has been beside the life rather than in it, who has heard the road from the margin, who has felt the movement of the crowd without being in the movement, who has been in the condition that positioned them alongside the road they were meant to be walking. The roadside is not the permanent condition. Bartimaeus left it. He threw the cloak aside and came. Tonight, in this lying down, in this 1 hour on the road's edge, the voice is calling. He is calling you. The crowd has been sent to say, "Get up." He is calling you. Let the standing still be received. He stood still, in response to the cry that the crowd called excessive, in response to the need the many said was too much, in response to the faith that would not go quiet when the quiet was demanded. He stood still, and the standing still has not ended. He is standing still right now, in response to every year of the 9 years, in response to every morning prayer that seemed to go no further than the ceiling, in response to every shout that was met with the crowd's rebuke. He is standing still. He has not moved. He is waiting for you to come. Let the question be received. What do you want me to do for you? Being asked right now, in this room, to you specifically, not to the category of people in need, to you. The specific want, the real one, the one the roadside has been carrying. You are allowed to answer, in the complete, honest, specific form of the actual want, not the presentation trained by the crowd's accounting. The real one, simple, honest. "Rabbi, I want to see." He is waiting. The crowd is not saying, "Be quiet." He has sent the crowd to bring you. Come, and tell him what you want. Let the faith be received. Your faith has healed you, the faith that cried out when the crowd said, "Be quiet." that shouted all the more when the many rebuked, that threw the cloak aside when the calling came, that came to Jesus without being able to see Jesus, that answered the question honestly when the question was asked. That faith, specifically, precisely, named by Jesus as the thing that heals, is your faith. The faith of the desperate, the faith of the one who cannot afford the quiet, the faith that does not require the evidence of the previous answers in order to cry out again. That faith has healed you, is healing you, right now. Bartimaeus threw his cloak aside, jumped to his feet, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go, your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Sleep now. He is standing still. He has heard your cry. And the one who stood still on the road outside Jericho, who stood still when the crowd said, "Be quiet," who asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" who received the answer and said, "Your faith has healed you," is here, standing still, in this room, through the whole, long, heard night.